Well, good morning, beloveds. Welcome as we gather for this time of devotion on Thursday, July 30th. Just a reminder that we will not have devotions tomorrow, but there will be again on Saturday, August 1st. This morning we are going to be in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5. I am Heather E. Clausen, pastor of Bethel Lutheran Church and United Methodist Church, both in Herman, Minnesota. So as we begin, let's talk a little bit about this epistle, this letter that we call the book of Ephesians. It is listed by that name, but seemed to be a circulating letter that went to many of the churches in the Asia Minor area. And this one, apparently, at the time it was shared, it was in the church in Ephesus. So this is a letter that's written to all believers, but in that time more so to Gentile believers. And it's really about, in many ways, the nature of the church, and has many of the metaphors that we have heard over the years as to the nature of the church. It has the metaphor of the household of God, the holy temple, Christ's body, the bride of Christ. And what was being lifted up is that in coming to earth, in spending this time with others, Jesus broke down something that had existed for generations, and that was this dividing wall between Jews and Gentiles. And in this letter, it brings hope. Paul doesn't ignore the divisions. Paul doesn't ignore some of the challenges that can be a part of being the church, the body of Christ, the bride of Christ, but lifts up the possibilities of being a part of this fellowship. And each one of these brings hope to the people then and always to us today. And there are several of those places of hope specifically directed to different individuals and groups of individuals in that society and in our society today, because he gives hope to the ones who are broken and need to know that they're restored, that when there are divisions, unity can occur, that the lost will be found, that the dead will be raised, that the lonely become part of a grouping, the church, that every person, every part of that is essential. And the reminder that those who society sees as inferior are standing well before God. The same reminders that we need today. Excuse me just a second. So I'm going to share these verses from chapter 5, and the verses are 15 through 17. Be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Well, there were two powerful lessons that I learned when I was in seminary. The first one was when I went through all my testing. And in that testing, the advisor who was working with me said, uh-oh, because with some of the things that they used, including Myers-Briggs, it was obvious that I am impulsive. And that seminary, and especially seminary while traveling, while raising a family, while working in the church, might be a bit overwhelming. And in the impulsivity, and in that, which I understand more deeply through the Enneagram, and we're not going to go too far into that, but everything to me is exciting. And I can be drawn away from the things that need to be done to the things that attract me. And so what was the training that they taught me? How to create a plan, even through a calendar, so that you keep up with deadlines. You keep up with, in seminary, all the reading you need to do, and of course that never ended. That continues when you're a pastor and you're preparing to preach and you're in leadership and you're trying to learn about the trends of church and trying to understand in these days how to do church. So that continues. So learning to pay attention to the time that is given and use it wisely. The other was given to me by an advisor when I worked in the therapy part of the seminary. And I had a tendency to say yes. Remember this idea of everything being interesting? Everything being seen as an opportunity and a challenge. And I had this advisor who was a therapist and also taught in the therapy side of the seminary, who walked by me when I was on the phone one day holding a sign that said, "No, say no, say no." It was a good lesson. And when we look at these words in Ephesians, when it says to us, be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. They were two really important lessons. Sometimes we learn in that way. Sometimes we learn when an illness strikes, and I can think of all the people that I've spoken to after they've had a heart attack, for example, who began to set some different priorities and began to not only use time wisely, but use rest wisely to care for themselves. And so there's a few learnings from this, and they are important. They are important for our care of self. They're important because we're given 24 hours a day to use wisely and effectively, not to waste time. And they're important in our witness, which may sound odd. But when we overschedule, sometimes we're not the one who shows up when we should show up. And I think we all know how frustrating that can be when someone says, "Oh yes, I'll be there," and then they don't show. Mainly because they are overcommitted. We all, sometimes as a family member, know we have people that have turned missing things on occasion, being tardy, almost into an art form. And it is a thing about time management, but it's also about respecting other people's time. When we overcommit, when we bounce off, as I was always prone to the next thing, we're also not being respectful of others in whom we are relationship, with whom we work, with whom we are family members. So these are some things that can be lifted up out of life and out of this passage of Ephesians. Live by priorities, not by pressure. I remember when I was doing youth and Christian education, I had a sign on my desk that says, your inability to plan does not become my emergency. Might have been for other people, but it also was for me. Learn how to value planning. Lists are okay. Actually, they feel good when we can check off the things that we've accomplished. But it also gives us a framework to say, I can't take that on. I have enough. And when we plan, we use what we have well, and we respect the schedules and time of others. Sometimes it is having someone around you that will veto the things that you shouldn't be doing. I've had those people, and I shared one. Yeah, Dan was a good one to remind me that there is a word, a very simple word. It's called no. And it can be done gracefully and kindly. Evaluate your energy level. Maybe this isn't the time to take on something else, or maybe it's time to let something go that is draining rather than fulfilling. And we do have to create buffer zones in our life to minimize interruptions. Maybe that is when we are busy with something is to hide the phone, to not check our email, to not do all those things, but to stay focused and to manage interruptions. I know on Sunday mornings when we're in churches, often people would come to me, to any pastor, and bring up things, and I always invite, please write it down. Because right now, my focus is on worship, and my focus is on the message that God has given me to bring. And I might not remember, and I don't want to be rude. I do want to follow up with you. And so I ask people, write it down, hand it to me. Then I will follow up. And don't allow yourself to take on assignments that belong to someone else. And that's the hardest, isn't it? Think about being a parent. Teaching a child to clean, teaching a child to do dishes, teaching a child to put things away. Wouldn't it be easier just to do it ourselves? Sure. But what's our role as a parent? To love and to train. So that when that child becomes an adult and goes off on their own, they have the skills to do the things that they will need to do that we no longer can do for them. And of course the big one is to learn to say no, and that is huge. Sometimes we just have to do that and just say, this is not a good time in my life to take that on. And maybe there's someone else you can suggest to them. Have you spoken to? Sometimes they're interested in things like that. And it's not passing it on. But in many ways, we're giving a gift. Because that person may be more geared to what's being asked to be done than you are. Maybe it would interest them more. We are to use our time and our life wisely. As Ephesians said, don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Well, what does the Lord want us to do? Take care of ourselves and others. Do the things that we are called to do and do them well. Not take on so much that everything just gets a little bit and not what it needs. So today, what I'd like to do is close with one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver. I still grieve that there, even with the wealth of writing that she has given to us, that there will be no more new poems from Mary Oliver. So this is called When I Am Among the Trees. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. The light flows from their branches and they call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. When we overdo, when we do not act wisely, when we do not make good choices for the time on earth that we are given, when we allow other things to crowd out what is essential. We need these words and the reminder from Mary Oliver. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. May you shine today. Amen.